The Spirit Tree, Tessa Lamar Novels, Book 1, Volume 1. Written by Kathryn M. Hearst. Narrated by Holly Adams. Dedication. For my great-grandma May, who taught me the value of a good story. Chapter 1. Some events leave scars. They mark time, changing life as you know it into something unrecognizable. Death split my life into two periods, before Charlie and after Charlie. That morning, I woke up crying without knowing why. Dread followed me through the day. It needled at my thoughts until I succumbed and acknowledged that someone I loved would die before the sun set. Tessa Marie, we need you to come to the hospital. It's your Uncle Charlie, my great-grandmother May said over the phone. Is he all right? I knew the answer. No, child. He had a heart attack and is on life support. The doctors are talking about turning off the machines. Please hurry. We're at Florida Hospital on Rollins Street. The call disconnected. My great-grandmother must have lost cell service. Her impeccable Southern manners wouldn't have allowed her to hang up without saying goodbye. I've got to go. I sprang from the bed, searching for my discarded clothing. Sex had been my last-ditch effort to shake the feeling that someone would die. It hadn't worked. I'll wait here until you get back. Ian, get up. You can't stay here. I pulled a t-shirt over my head. Ian threw the blanket off and tugged on his jeans. What's going on? My uncle is on life support. This can't be happening. He can't die. I need him too much. I just talked to him this morning. He sounded fine. There has to be a mistake. I slipped on my flip-flops and headed for the door. Let me drive. Ian jangled his keys. I wanted to tell him to stay put, but I didn't feel like driving. We rode in silence for a while before Ian sighed and turned on the radio. A disembodied voice reported the murder of a young mother and the possible kidnapping of two small children. The victim's mother had found her daughter's body in the kitchen earlier that day. The children hadn't been located, and the police had yet to release any names. I drew my knees to my chest and prayed for both my own family and that of the murdered woman. Want me to come in? Ian eased the car to a stop. I studied him for the first time since the call had ruined our alone time. Wide-eyed, he rubbed his palm on his thigh and shifted in his seat. His expression puzzled me. I couldn't tell if he was worried about me or if he feared I would actually ask him to come inside. We'd dated about 3 weeks, if hanging out during happy hour and having sex at every opportunity counted as dating. Come to think of it, we'd never had a proper date. No, I'm fine. Thank you, though. Ian exhaled and grasped the steering wheel. He started to pull away before the car door even shut. Actions spoke louder than words, and his actions screamed. I stood on the sidewalk and gathered the courage to walk into the hospital's lobby. My skin prickled as I passed through the glass doors. I turned and found the woman behind the welcome desk glaring. Under the puff of cottony white hair, two dark, beady eyes fixed on me. The woman wore a blue vest with a colorful badge that proclaimed her status as a volunteer. Her lips twisted in disapproval. I wondered, what have I done to offend her? I resisted the urge to rush up the escalators in order to avoid the sour old woman. Behind the welcome desk was the hospital gift shop, filled with flowers and balloons. The contrast between the not-so-welcome desk and the happy little gift shop made me grin. I squared my shoulders and walked to the desk. Can you tell me what room Charles Nokoseka is in? Nokoseka? How do you spell that?" The old woman glared at me. I spelled the last name for her, exaggerating the pronunciation of each letter. I knew the drill. It wasn't my last name, but I'd spelled Nokoseka 1,000,000 times. The woman typed in the name, looking between me and the screen. "He is in ICU, step down. Only immediate family members are allowed to visit." For some unknown reason, the little old lady had an issue with me. "I'm his niece, but he raised me—" What the hell? I didn't have time to argue. I needed to find my uncle. "You've missed visiting hours." Considering they called me to pull the damned plug, I don't think visiting hours are going to be an issue. Tell me where he is. My outburst surprised us both. I didn't care. I hurried to the escalators, then took the metal steps 2 at a time. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I needed to get to my family. Something was wrong. More wrong than the fact that the man who'd raised me was fighting for his life at this very moment. I rounded the corner to the step-down unit and stopped. 2 large men stood in front of the elevators, blocking the hall. Their size didn't strike me as much as their ponytails and sharp features did. They could have been members of Charlie's tribe coming to pay their last respects, had it not been for their tight expressions and stiff postures. They were angry. Very angry. I turned and went in the opposite direction until the elevator pinged. I counted to 10 and doubled back toward Charlie's room, pausing in the hallway. At least 20 family members had gathered in the waiting room, including my mother. At that moment, I would rather have gone up against the 2 big guys in the hall than face down my family. I should have guessed my mother would be there. Even still, it struck me like a punch to the gut. All eyes turned to me when I stepped into the waiting room. I scanned the faces, searching for my great-grandmother or great-aunt, but found neither. The television in the corner caught my attention. The newscast reported on the story of the murdered mother. Pictures of the young woman with 2 small children flashed across the screen. The police urged the public to call with any information regarding the whereabouts of the kids. Hearing the story on the radio had tugged at my heartstrings. Seeing the children's faces yanked them out. Shit. Now, darling, that is something we do, not something we say. The sweet southern drawl and gentle chiding made me feel like I was 8 years old. Grandma had told me the same thing while standing in her vegetable garden. The second time I cursed in front of her earned me ivory soap for mouthwash. I bent down to hug May's short, round body. Grandma had grown up in abject poverty, but behaved like a southern lady. She grew her own tomatoes, drank her tea sweet as cane, and could drop a deer or a whiskey in 1 shot. "How is he?" I cringed, wanting to believe Glinda the Good Witch would swoop down in her bubble and fix all the wrongs. "Not good, darling." "Can I see him?" "He's waiting for you." May took a firm grip on my hand and led me away from the wide-eyed family members. Grandma didn't have that determined look in her eyes often. They all knew to get out of her way when she did. Everyone, that is, except my mother. Chapter 2. "Tessa! Oh, I'm so glad you came!" Darlene rushed toward me with arms outstretched, her heavy makeup ruined with twin black streaks. A well-used tissue hung in her hand as she reached for me. Sure, now she acknowledges my presence. Long ago, I would have sold my soul for a few moments of my mother's attention. That ended around the time I turned 10. May shook her head while Darlene pretended not to notice. I sidestepped the unwelcome hug and mouthed, "Sorry," to my angry-faced mother as Grandma dragged me toward the door. Darlene narrowed her eyes. "Tessa thinks she's too good for us." A knot tightened in my stomach as family members surrounded my mother. They cooed and petted her, agreeing with everything she said. Little did they know how hard I'd fought to achieve a sense of self-worth. I'd struggled for years to overcome the pain of my childhood and to recreate myself. My family, like my southern accent, proved impossible to overcome. "Trauma, Grandma whispered as she ushered me down the hall. "Don't let them shake you. They come out when there's blood or money on the line." I forced myself to ignore my family. Truth be told, my real family consisted of the 3 people who weren't huddled in the waiting room. Grandma, Uncle Charlie, and Aunt Dottie had raised me. My mother came to collect me a few times, promising things would be different. The visits always ended sooner rather than later, and I found myself back on Dottie and Charlie's doorstep. The second I entered his room, tears sprang to my eyes. I covered my mouth to stop the scream rising in my throat. I wanted to run away, to go home to Charlie's house and visit over sweet tea. I wanted him to tell me everything would be all right. I hugged Aunt Dottie. When had my vivacious aunt grown old and frail? How long had it been since I'd sat with her, watching soap operas and eating macaroons? I turned toward my uncle, and my knees went out from under me. As they'd done my entire life, Dottie and May steadied me until I could stand on my own 2 feet. "We're going to be right outside," Dottie whispered and patted my shoulder. My mouth fell open and I shook my head. Before I could form a word of protest, they left me alone with my uncle and several large, noisy machines. Each step toward him felt like a monumental accomplishment. I sat on the edge of his bed, transfixed by the gentle rise and fall of his chest. His jet-black hair had grayed, and the smile lines on his cheeks had deepened. "I'm sorry I've been away so long. I promise I'll take care of Dottie and Grandma for you." Memories flooded me as I placed my hand on top of my uncle's. I remembered being a tiny girl and setting my hand against his, measuring my small fingers against his larger ones, marveling over how pale my skin looked next to his. My green eyes searching his dark brown eyes, I'd ask, "Am I Cherokee?" "About half, I'd reckon," he'd reply. I'd crinkle my nose and giggle, "Which half? Your color is white, but you're stubborn as all Indian." He'd laugh in his deep, good-hearted way and kiss the top of my nose. I would have given my life to hear that laugh again. "I need you. Please stay with us." A soft sound filled the room, a whistled melody that reminded me of both nature and Uncle Charlie. I thought I was imagining it, until I recognized the tune. He whistled it while working in the yard or when one of the tribe came for healing. I'd never asked about those visits, though I always knew he served as the tribe's medicine man. The fluorescents overhead flickered and hummed, causing my temples to throb. I pulled back the heavy drapes and sunlight flooded the room. I would have opened the window, but it was bolted shut. At least I'd given him sunlight. I knew Charlie appreciated the effort. The whistling began again. I focused on breathing. Inhale, 1, 2. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Inhale, 1. I'd seen spirits before, but never the spirit of someone I loved. A fresh breeze caressed my cheek, and my eyes flew open. I couldn't see the spirit as much as feel it. I closed my eyes again, and lips kissed the tip of my nose. There you are. And here you are, little flame. Charlie's voice sounded distant, nothing solid to hold on to. Still, it moved with life and warmth. Your aunt and great-grandmother are in danger. Crows will come from my notebook to learn my secrets. Our secrets. Go get my cedar box and take it to Dr. Hicks in Gainesville. He will help you. I don't understand. Who would want your box? What secrets? I stopped talking and focused on the more important issue. Don't leave us. Please, you can't die. Some things cannot be changed. Others can. Listen to me. A cold sweat broke out across my brow, and I felt faint. Maybe my blood sugar had bottomed out. I'd skipped dinner in favor of having a flat tummy during the roll in the hay with Ian. The added stress was causing me to hallucinate. Tessa, tell Dr. Hicks you're my granddaughter. His voice drifted, lost to alarms and beeps. What? Great niece? You meant great niece, right? Doctors and nurses filed in. Dottie clung to the doorframe with May. Dottie? I couldn't move, let alone form a sentence. A nurse ushered us into the hallway, directly into the Crusher family. Someone shouted, Tessa pulled the plug! Others spoke all at once. By far, Darlene's voice rang the loudest. My mother accusing me of killing my uncle. Come with me. My great-grandmother tried to shield me from the mob. Dottie wrapped her arms around me, whispering calming words. I couldn't breathe. I struggled free of the embrace and ran away from my mother's acrid voice. No matter how far I ran, the continuous monotone beep of the monitor echoed in my ears. Chapter 3. I hit the ground floor in a blind panic. Ian had dropped me off, so I had no car, no way to get back to my apartment. In my rush to get to the hospital, I'd forgotten my purse and cell phone. I needed to think. I needed to be still, but my brain refused to cooperate. I ran out the glass doors and dropped onto a bench. In the corner of my consciousness, I sensed people watching me. It's a hospital. People die here and families cry and mourn. Big deal. Stare away. I tried to make sense of Charlie's warning. I remembered the heat rolling off the men waiting for the elevator. I bolted upright and surveyed my surroundings. Waiting outside didn't seem prudent, all things considered. I marched to the welcome desk. I forgot my phone and need to make a call. Please. The volunteer's attitude hadn't improved. The woman scowled and turned the phone toward me. The old woman made a point to watch as I dialed. Haley, I'm at the hospital on Rollins Street. My uncle died and I need a ride. Can you come get me, please? I stopped listening after she said yes. My gut told me to stay inside. The sane, educated side of me balked, craving sunshine. The entire ordeal had produced some sort of psychosomatic paranoia. Research showed that bereft loved ones often turned to magical thinking of ghosts and mediums in order to hold on to some part of their deceased loved ones. It seemed logical, but the textbooks didn't account for the scope of sensations and emotions rolling through me. I wandered toward the windows, telling myself I should look out for Haley. I scanned the front walkways and the line of shrubs on the other side of the road. Every small movement drew my attention and made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I waited for what felt like hours, preoccupied with looking for the boogeyman. I startled when Haley waved from the other side of the window. "Thanks for picking me up. Ian dropped me off, and I didn't think about how I was going to get home. I hope this isn't too much trouble." My words came out too fast. "Tessa, chill. It's not a problem." Haley put the car in drive. "Are you sure you want to go home?" "Yeah, I need my car. I have to go take care of some things at my uncle's." I sank into the seat. "I can go with you. I don't have to be at work until morning." Haley reached over to pat my thigh. "Hell, I can call off. It's not like they're going to fire me." "No, I can't imagine your dad firing you. Who else would put up with counseling spoiled rich kids?" "Certainly not you. Seriously, when are you going to grow a maternal instinct?" "Maybe when I'm 30. Haley grinned. "I'll come in. I miss staying up all night talking with you." "Thanks, but I want to go alone. I think I need some quiet time to process all of this." "Right. Just don't isolate yourself or spend too much time with that crazy-ass mother of yours. Neither are healthy options." Haley shook her head. "She was at the hospital. She accused me of pulling the plug." Haley's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What the hell? That woman makes Mommy Dearest look tame. What happened? I mean, what happened to Charlie?" I turned toward the window. "Grandma called and said he had a heart attack and was on life support. I didn't get any other details. The second I got there, they took me in to see him. 5 minutes later, the machine started going crazy and he was gone." "I'm sorry." Haley squeezed my hand. "Something weird happened. I don't know how to explain it. I knew something bad was going to happen today, and at the hospital, you've always been freakishly intuitive. Tell me what happened." I admired Haley. She was calm and even-keeled until she spat out a slew of curses that would have sent Grandma running for a bar of soap. Haley gave the car in front of us the one-finger salute. The guy had almost run us off the road. "Sorry, Tessa. Ever since I hit 10 weeks, my hormones have been out of control." As soon as the words came out of her mouth, Haley went wide-eyed. "I planned to tell you. Scott made me promise to wait until after the first trimester. Some ridiculous superstition." I snapped my mouth shut. "So this is why you guys have been avoiding going to Fitzpatrick's with me and Ian for happy hour. I thought you were blowing us off." "No, we've been avoiding going because we can't stand Ian." Haley smirked. "Hormones got your tongue again?" "No, just the truth. The guy is a complete douche." "Seriously, Haley, is that your professional diagnosis?" I snorted in laughter. "He is a douche, isn't he? You can do much better. I mean, look at you. You're like Jessica Rabbit with your long red hair and curves. I'd kill for your figure." "You have to say that because you're my friend. Try being 5'2" with D cups." I crossed my arms. "Boobs aren't all they're cracked up to be." "I wouldn't know. But maybe mine will finally blossom now that I'm pregnant. I lost myself in my thoughts for the remainder of the drive. When we arrived at my building, Haley parked outside and cut the motor. Now that I have that off my chest, tell me what happened that was so weird. She put on her professional face. I can see it upset you. Are you going to charge me for this session? I can't afford your hourly rate. Out with it. Haley grinned. I debated telling her about the ghostly message from beyond, but Haley never accepted anything except science. She would come up with some well-researched clinical explanation. I needed to believe Charlie had reached out to me. Besides, if some sort of danger lurked about, I couldn't put Haley in harm's way, pregnant or not. It's the same old family drama, Haley. Nothing new. I smiled to cover my lie. Thanks for the ride. I need to get going, and you need to get home and put your feet up. Don't forget, you're growing a baby. Chapter 4. After 2 minutes alone in my apartment, I wanted to call Haley. The space felt too quiet, too dark, and too empty. Even after I turned on every light, I couldn't shake my unease. I turned on the television, and the screen filled with the coverage of the murdered mother and missing children. The place needed a good scrubbing. I had no one to blame but myself for the piles of dirty dishes, discarded clothes, and books. Maybe I should clean and get a couple of hours of sleep before retrieving the cedar box. A soft pillow and a warm blanket sounded good, but even on a good night, sleep eluded me. Insomnia was a long-lasting side effect of my graduate school days. I decided to ignore the apartment and pack a bag. I would need my laptop if I had to track down this Hicks guy. The older generation of my family didn't waste their money on computers. They'd only recently broken down and ordered cable. The picture of Charlie and Dottie on my nightstand caught my eye. I sat on the bed, staring at their smiling faces, remembering the day I'd taken the photo. The entire family had gathered to celebrate Grandmay's birthday. Charlie had unrolled a piece of visqueen on the lawn and set the hose at one end. He was soaking wet after a turn on the homemade slip and slide and had grabbed Dottie for a hug. Their smiles both warmed and broke my heart. I buried my face in my pillow and willed myself to cry. The tears wouldn't come, no matter how hard I tried. I closed my eyes and focused on my memories of that day. Ribs cooked on the grill and laughter in the air. Would we ever have another day like that? Day of easy joy? I woke in a panic but couldn't remember the nightmare. My heart raced and my head felt heavy. I had no idea how long I'd slept, but fatigue slowed my every movement. I had to go to Charlie's and find his cedar box, but my body begged for rest. On some level, I knew grief caused my exhaustion, but refused to give in. There would be time to mourn later. I drove in the dark early morning with the window down. The car reeked of cigarettes. Ian smoked, and though I hated the smell, I'd never bothered to ask him not to smoke in my car. Haley's assessment was spot on. He was a jerk. I needed to break things off, but how? Calling him would cause too much drama. Email? Impersonal. Texting? Tacky. In the end, I decided to play the avoidance game and eliminate the chances of a confrontation. It might be cowardly, but I had enough on my plate without adding a wounded male ego to the mix. My thoughts drifted from Ian to Charlie to my mother to the murdered stranger to Haley's baby. Nothing stuck long enough to matter. My body knew the way to the house in the backwoods without the need to engage my brain. The car crossed a set of rough railroad tracks and continued on to a dirt drive that ran parallel to the tracks. A patch of green grass grew down the middle of the drive. On each side of the grass, white sand dipped and rose like the hills of a roller coaster. One side rose while the other side dipped, so all four wheels sat at different levels. Graham May called them God's speed bumps. As I stepped out of the car, a chill ran down the length of my spine. Several sets of tiny black eyes stared. My snake sense. No matter how many years I spent in the backwoods of Florida, I never got used to all the dang snakes. Using the light from my phone, I illuminated my feet in time to see a black racer slide under my car. Each step I took, the phone lit up more snakes. What the fuck? I glanced over my shoulder, thankful my great-grandmother wasn't around to hear me use the ultimate bad word. I thought I'd jump out of my skin by the time I reached the front steps. The stairs consisted of concrete blocks stacked in neat rows. To my dismay, another snake rested on the second step. I shined the light on it, made shooing sounds, and stomped my feet. The dang thing refused to move. Its eyes reminded me of the old woman at the hospital, small, black, and mean. I set my foot on the step above the snake, expecting it to slither toward my ankle. It didn't move, except to turn its head and watch me open the door. Once inside, I shook my arms and hopped around to shake the feeling of those beady eyes. I left the porch light off to prevent attracting a battalion of bugs. Inside, I turned on every light to chase the shadows away. Pipe smoke and Old Spice, the scents of Uncle Charlie, lingered in the second bedroom. A twin bed and a desk sat against opposite walls, with a narrow walkway between the two. A cheap particle board bookcase contained rows of old glass jelly jars, coffee cans, and the like. Charlie had labeled each container in a language I couldn't read. I crawled under the desk to reach the bottom shelf where Charlie kept his cedar box. The hand-carved wood was as smooth as polished stone. I scrambled out from under the desk as a daddy longlegs crawled down the wall. Next to snakes, spiders were my least favorite creatures. I sat on the bed, feeling like a little girl getting into something forbidden. I said a quick prayer and opened the box. When nothing exploded and no one yelled, I peeked inside. I smiled at a picture from my third birthday party. I was sitting on Uncle Charlie's lap beside a pink triple-layer cake. Charlie had a huge smile, and I crinkled my face to wink. Kool-Aid stained the front of my homemade smock dress, and my hair was a wild mess of red tangles. My vision blurred, and I set the picture aside. Okay, enough with the pity party. The remaining contents included newspaper clippings from my high school and college graduations, a yellowed funeral notice for Charlie and Dottie's only child that read, Nathaniel Nokoseka, 2. An envelope addressed to Dr. Marvin Hicks, University of Florida, and an old composition book held together by a thick rubber band. I placed everything back inside and stuffed the entire box into my laptop bag. My stomach growled, sending me to the kitchen, where I proceeded to raid the refrigerator. Finding food in Dottie's refrigerator reminded me of a game of hide-and-seek. All sorts of good things hid inside old plastic containers. The Cool Whip container held some potato salad, a keeper. I set it on the counter. The small country crock bowl contained green beans. Those went back. The large country crock container held margarine. I opened an orange container and found leftover meatloaf. Jackpot. I grabbed the ketchup, bread, American cheese, and mayo. By the time I sat down, I'd eaten half of the cold meatloaf. Outside, a dog growled, something fierce, probably tangling with one of those darned snakes. I rinsed my dishes, determined to ignore the dog. I didn't want to go out before the sun rose. The dog started to howl. Had the neighbor's hunting dogs cornered a possum? I dried my hands and opened the front door. At first, I didn't see the animals, but they must have seen me because they darted for the porch. 3 large black dogs. No, too big to be dogs. Wolves? Holy cow! 3 wolves stared from the bottom of the porch steps. I didn't know which freaked me out more, the huge wolves or the gyrating pile of snakes now covering the porch. I ducked inside, slammed the door, locked the deadbolt, turned the useless lock on the knob, and set the chain for good measure. My shaking fingers made it difficult to dial the phone. 911, what is your emergency? Snakes! Lots of snakes! I'm trapped inside. There are wolves, 3 big ones. Black, I think. Please help me. I'm trapped inside. You need to call Animal Services after 8 a.m. The woman on the other end of the phone paused. Did you say wolves? Are you sure they aren't big dogs? My hand tightened around the phone. No! Wolves! Listen! I went to the jalousie windows and opened one enough for the operator to hear the sounds of 3 huge-ass wolves howling. Do you hear them? That is going on outside your house? Yes. Please send help to 2011 Sandy Lane, Apopka. This is my uncle's house. My name is Tessa Lamar. I'm alone and freaked the hell out. Send police. Guns. Guns are good. One of the wolves slammed into the window. I screamed and dropped the phone. The wolf clawed the slats of glass as I cranked the window closed. What kind of wolf tried to pry a window open? I hightailed it to the master bedroom and pulled out a single-barrel shotgun, a semi-automatic camo-colored brand-spanking-new shotgun. Uncle Charlie used it for hunting, scaring off the Jehovah's Witnesses and ensuring that the family from hell didn't get too rowdy. I checked for shells. 1 in the chamber, a full magazine, and a ghost round floating on the carrier. I had 5 rounds and 3 wolves. The odds were in my favor. Could I shoot 3 moving targets from inside the house without breaking a window? I debated my options until I heard the glass break and the claws begin to scratch against the metal. The darned thing had managed to get its paw inside the broken slat. I stuffed the barrel into the broken slat and fired. Glass shattered, but only 1 slat broke. The kickback wasn't as bad as I expected. Unlike Charlie's old gun, it didn't knock me flat on my butt. The wolf fell back onto the wooden porch. My ears rang enough to block out sound. The sun broke over the horizon as 2 wolves retreated across the yard. On the porch, the snakes moved over the large mass of the fallen wolf. Beneath the snakes, I swore I saw skin, not fur. What the hell? I tried to get a better look, but couldn't through the various shades of snake. I grabbed the phone and rested the shotgun against my shoulder. Hello? I can't hear you. I shot one of the wolves. At least I hoped I'd shot a wolf. It looked like the snakes had moved off the body of a very naked and very dead man. Chapter 5. Flashing lights in the distance caused my heart to race. The first set of headlights bobbled and bumped along the dirt road. A second and third set followed close behind. Their arrival should have been a relief. Instead, I tried to remember the legalities of shooting people before they broke in. A few years ago, the stand your ground laws were all over the news. If only I'd paid more attention. 2 uniformed police officers looked between the 2 houses. I flipped the porch light on and off until they moved in my direction. The male officer made a sound equivalent to an 8-year-old girl getting her ponytail tugged. The female officer shook her head and pretended to ignore the snakes. When she approached the door, the snakes moved out of her way, like Moses parting the Red Sea. I opened the door and froze in place as the female police officer drew her pistol, shouting. The other officer noticed the dead guy on the porch and started screaming out more commands. By the time I realized what was happening, I had 3 guns trained on me, another cop yelling into the radio, more than likely calling for backup, and the snakes were rallying around me. "Drop the weapon and get down on the floor," the female repeated. "Oh, sorry." I set the shotgun down on the porch, went to my knees, and thought better of it when the snakes moved over my calves. "Snakes, please, let me go inside." No one knew what to do. They all stared at me with varying degrees of concern, pity, and rage. Having someone lie down in a pile of snakes had to be cruel and unusual punishment. I started to rise when one of the male cops shouted to stay down. The female shook her head. "Woo-wee! I'm a licensed mental health therapist. My name is Tessa Lamar. My uncle and aunt, Charles and Dottie Nokoseka, own this house. I'm going to stand and get away from these snakes before one of them bites me." I ignored the shouts and stood. I eased into the house. No snakes lurked about the living room. I bent over to look under the couch, and pain tore through my calf. Had a snake bitten me? Was that a gunshot? My ears rang. The commotion from the porch confused me, and my vision swam as my brain slowly accepted the fact that I'd been shot. I woke in the back of an ambulance. An IV tube stuck in my arm, and something smelled suspiciously like soured meatloaf and sweet pickles. I'd vomited down the front of my shirt. "Now, you listen here. My granddaughter was in fear for her life. Some crazy, naked lunatic was breaking into the house. She said there were wolves, so there were wolves. There are large tracks near the porch. A few are still there, even after your people trampled all over the evidence. She has a severe fear of snakes and was in a state of shock. Leave her be, or I'll have the entire Cherokee nation at the station before you can blink. They won't be happy to hear you shot her." May spoke loud enough to be heard 2 counties over. "Grandma, it's okay. I'm fine." I tried to sit, but someone had handcuffed me to the gurney. "Am I under arrest?" "They're sorting it out. You don't need to worry." May locked eyes with an officer. "Ms. Lamar, would you mind answering a few questions?" The female peeked inside. "No, it's fine." I tried to smile, but the slightest movement took too much effort. If there are pain medications in the IV, my statement won't be legal. The female officer appeared surprised by my reply.
We'll take a formal statement once we get you to the hospital. There are some things we need to know, if you wouldn't mind.
Okie dokie.
The emergency operator said you called in an animal attack? Other than snakes, we haven't found any stray dogs or wolves.
There were 3 wolves, maybe dogs. The way they were howling and their size, I don't know. It was dark. I regretted consenting to answering questions.
When did you see the male trying to enter the house?
Honestly, I thought it was one of the wolves. It was still dark outside, and I saw a black shape. I had all of the lights on inside, so I couldn't see clearly. Whatever it was had pried open the jalousie window near the door. I thought he was going to get inside the house. I tried to wipe my face, but couldn't. I started to shake and went on blubbering about snakes, Charlie, and the picture from my 3rd birthday. The EMT must have taken pity on me because he injected something into my IV. Chapter 6. I woke in the hospital with May sleeping in the chair beside the bed. Dottie stared out the window. I lifted my arm, relieved someone had removed the handcuffs. Someone had changed me out of my vomit-covered T-shirt. The hospital gown wasn't much of an improvement, but it didn't smell. Am I going to jail?
No, they're still investigating what happened. I called our attorney, and he assured me you acted within your legal rights. We're thinking about pressing charges against the dumbass who shot you.
May blushed when she caught herself cuss. I shook my head and regretted it. It was chaos. I don't want to press charges. I didn't even realize I was holding a gun. I was freaked out by all the snakes.
Well, you may feel differently if they charge you with murder.
May fussed over the blanket. What was the deal with the snakes? I've never seen so many of them. It was like a scene from a movie or something.
With all of the rain and construction for the new Walmart, they must have decided our place was safe. You know how your uncle feels about killing snakes. They're considered sacred,
May said. I hadn't paid attention to my leg until a nurse came in and messed with my calf. As soon as I thought about it, it throbbed. Kind of like a mosquito bite. They never itch until you see them, but then you can't stop scratching. Is it bad?
The bullet grazed your calf. Lucky for you, it missed the bone.
My stomach lurched. The nurse must have seen it in my face because she moved in front of me with a tiny, bean-shaped container. False alarm. Even if I needed to puke, the idea of hitting such a small target made me swallow it back down. On TV, reporters clamored for a statement as cops brought the estranged husband of the murdered woman into the police station. The anchorman said the father refused to cooperate with the investigation. To add drama to the story, they flashed pictures of the children, smiling with their mother and father. They made a beautiful family.
Such a shame,
Dottie said.
May nodded. It's always the parents.
Before I could respond, a plainclothes detective and the female cop from the house came into the room. I remembered the female, Officer Smith.
How are you feeling?
The detective looked me over. The nurse gave him a weary look before leaving the room. Grandma May stayed put in the chair, and Aunt Dottie stood. Neither woman gave off warm fuzzies. I'm okay. A little nauseous.
The DA doesn't plan to file any charges against you. You appear to have acted in self-defense. We do have some questions that will help us close the case, though, if you don't mind.
The detective hesitated at the death stares coming from the older women in the room. Sure, I guess that's fine. Do I need an attorney present?
It's your right to have an attorney present, although it's not necessary. You acted in self-defense.
His reply came across rehearsed. Ask away. I questioned the wisdom of answering questions without a lawyer present, but how much trouble could I cause with May and Dottie in the room?
Did you know the perp?
No, I don't think so. I didn't see his face. Maybe? Oh, yeah, I regretted agreeing to questioning. The detective pulled out a picture of the naked guy's face, along with a fair amount of blood and the faded green stain of the porch.
Do you recognize him?
Bile rose in my throat, and I shook my head. The guy in the picture might have been Native American. He reminded me of the guys getting into the elevator. No, I don't think so. Maybe when I'm out of here I can come down to the station and look again?
Of course.
The detective put the picture away.
We confirmed that the large animal prints outside the house were too big to be canine. Do you have any idea why the house was overrun with snakes?
No, but it has rained a lot lately. Maybe they were looking for dry ground? The detective made a grunting sound.
Is it common knowledge that you're afraid of snakes?
You think that guy brought the snakes to freak me out?
It's a possibility.
The room began to spin. Wouldn't that mean he was out to get me? And this wasn't some random break-in?
Maybe. What time did you arrive at 2011 Sandy Lane?
The detective didn't have much inflection in his voice, but his jaw tensed. I don't know. 4:30 or 5? I went home, took a nap, and drove over.
Did you tell anyone where you were going?
Just my friend Haley. She drove me home from the hospital. But please, don't question her. She's pregnant and doesn't need the stress. Let me talk to her first. As soon as the words fell out of my mouth, I realized I sounded guilty. Her name is Haley Jenkins. She lives at 3220 North Haywood.
We'll wait until you're released to contact her. Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry for all the trouble. It's not every day we encounter so much wildlife on a call.
He turned to leave. Officer Smith moved closer.
I apologize for the mix-up. The officer who shot you was aiming for a rattler on the concrete steps. The shot ricocheted off the block and hit you.
It was a strange situation, to say the least. I hadn't noticed any rattlesnakes in the bunch. The story reeked of CYA by the Orange County Police Department. But if they didn't press charges, I'd let it go. Chapter 7. The nurse informed me that I'd be released later in the afternoon. Good news and bad. While I wanted to go home, my leg ached once they weaned me off the IV pain meds. Grandma and Dottie excused themselves to go to my apartment and pick up clean clothes, since the ones I'd worn to the hospital were covered in blood and vomit. I woke from a nap to find a strange man sitting at the end of my bed. A Native American, judging by his dark skin and deep brown eyes. Age and the sun had wrinkled his face. He met my eyes and tipped his white cowboy hat. A band of black fur and a fluffy black tail accented his hat. My pulse beat in my ears. I fumbled for the call button, and the man disappeared. The distorted voice of a nurse filled the room. Yes? Sorry, I was trying to turn on the television. By force of will and a healthy dose of fear, I managed to stay awake until the discharge nurse came. I partially listened as the nurse went over wound care instructions and gave me a quick lesson on the proper use of crutches. Dottie and May returned with a change of clothes as the nurse removed the IV. Another hour passed while we waited for the orderly to come with the wheelchair. Once in Dottie's car, I couldn't keep quiet. I saw a man with a white cowboy hat in my room. My aunt's eyes tensed in the rearview mirror. Grandma turned in her seat.
We'll talk once we get you home and resting.
Not what I wanted to hear. I wanted them to poke fun, laugh it off, and be done with the subject. I hadn't mentioned the conversation with Uncle Charlie's ghost or the wolf guy on the porch. No one asked, and I didn't want to get into it in the hospital. People had found themselves locked in the psych ward for less. Hell, I'd signed the orders to lock up a few of them. The rocking of the car on the drive drew me from my thoughts. From the outside looking in, the piece of land appeared peaceful. Too bad the hairs on the back of my neck didn't feel the same way. A spike of fear made it difficult to breathe. Aunt Dottie, I need to get my phone and computer bag. I left them in your house last night.
All right, we'll go with you.
I wondered how Dottie felt about walking into her house for the first time since her husband died. Heaven knows it had been nonstop drama since Charlie passed away. We walked to the porch in heavy silence. I hobbled along on crutches. No snakes were out and about in the afternoon sun, but the way my skin crawled told me they were watching. Inside, the house looked the same as it had the night before, with the exception of a large bloodstain on the carpet. In the stillness, I heard my aunt's heart breaking all over again. She stood in her living room, looking around as if she'd never seen the room before. Well, I should get some dinner cooking. I have leftover meatloaf. I'll warm it up for us, Dottie said. I cringed. I ate most of it last night. Sorry. Dottie laughed.
It's all right. I wasn't looking forward to leftovers anyway. How about some pizza?
Pizza sounds great. I need to go to my apartment and get some work clothes. Want me to pick it up on my way back?
Are you sure it's a good idea to be driving?
I feel fine, don't worry. I'll be back before dark.
Tessa Marie, you're not supposed to drive on pain pills. I've had my fill of hospitals. If you get in a wreck, don't look for me to come sit with you, May added.
I'll take it easy. I promise. Perhaps they were right, but I needed some time to myself. Once on the highway, I turned the radio volume up to an obscene level, anything to drown out the noise in my head. I entered my apartment, took a step back, and checked the number on the door. This couldn't be my place. Dottie and May had cleaned the place from floor to ceiling. Sparkling clean dishes sat in the drainer, and the week-old pizza box had vanished, along with the mountain of dirty clothes and books. No wonder it had taken them so long to return to the hospital. They'd cleaned up my mess. Now if they could only clean up my mess of a life. I needed to do laundry. The only clean underthings had holes, looked dingy, or were granny panties I kept in case I needed extra modesty, or a reason not to get naked with someone. In the end, I tossed the dirty clothes into a suitcase to wash at my great-grandmother's place. I added a few pairs of shoes and zipped it. In the bathroom, I packed makeup and toiletries, careful to hide the pink packet of birth control pills. I smiled as I answered the phone. Hi, Gram. I'm on my way back.
Don't worry about pizza. Selma from next door brought over a casserole, and some of the ladies from the church showed up with more food. We'll be eating sympathy casseroles for weeks. Neither my aunt nor my great-grandmother would willingly eat other people's cooking. Dinners would be like eating with a couple of food critics. All right, see you soon. I almost hung up, but added, I love you, Graham. I love you too, sweetheart. Don't be too long. I dropped my phone into my purse, and it rang again. I wished I hadn't answered as soon as I hit the button. Hi, Ian. Are you busy tonight? I have beer and you have HBO. His voice grated on my frazzled nerves. My uncle died. Thanks for asking. I was shocked. I hate beer. Get your own damned HBO and lose my number. I disconnected and mumbled, asshole. I hoped I'd disconnected before I said the last word. Chapter 8. Grandma and Aunt Dottie were waiting at May's kitchen table when I came through the door. Is everything okay? We were just visiting. May smiled. I moved toward my bedroom. I'll be right back. Where are your crutches? Dottie asked. In the car. They're more trouble than they're worth. I dumped everything in the tiny bedroom and joined them. My leg had gone from a mild throb to full-blown pain, and Ian's call turned my already gloomy mood into something worse. Your leg might be feeling better if you'd use the crutches like the doctor said. May set dinner on the table. I couldn't carry my bags. May raised her brows. You're right. I'll use them. I eased my leg onto the chair beside me. We decided it's best if we all sleep here tonight. May poured a glass of sweet tea and set it in front of me. Thanks, Graham. Sounds good to me. I scooped myself a heaping serving of salmon salad. I need to be up early. I have to work, and I should stop by the police station on my way in. You shouldn't talk to them without a lawyer, Tessa. Dottie served herself a helping. I need to look through some photos to see if I can identify the naked guy. I ignored the grunt of disapproval from May when I spoke with my mouth full. May pulled a necklace from her pocket. You need to put this on. Don't take it off, even in the tub. I studied the turquoise and silver pendant. In the center, several snakes curled around a silhouette of a bird flying toward a tiny sun. It's beautiful, but I thought it was forbidden to have the likeness of a snake in your home. It is, but Charlie revered snakes, and I think they revered him. This is a protection amulet. Thanks. I slid the necklace over my head, and the amulet heated against my skin. What did you do to this thing? It's practically burning me. I didn't do anything. Please tell me what's going on. May and Dottie exchanged looks. Go take a bath. I left out the little rose soaps you love so much. We'll talk when you're done. May's chin rose, and I knew better than to argue. I ran a bath and sank into the tub, propping my injured leg on the outer edge. Being in the familiar space made me feel better. Here, I could pretend the world made sense. I imagined myself at 8 years old, soaking in the clawfoot tub. The water clouded from the quarter-size rose-shaped soaps. I sang a song that sounded like gibberish, more sounds than words. Grandma baked oatmeal raisin cookies in the kitchen. Uncle Charlie trimmed the hedges, whistling his private tune, while Dottie sunned herself nearby. If only I could go back to that time, I wouldn't take a second for granted. I hummed the song from my childhood, trying to hold on to the memories.
The song still haunted my dreams, though I couldn't remember the words. Like so many childhood things, the lyrics were lost when I realized they weren't real. A female figure appeared in the steamy bathroom, a beautiful woman with long red hair and pale skin. She was tall and willowy, with delicate features. This woman had appeared to me a few times over the years, always here, in the rose-scented mist of my bath. I whispered, "Are you real?"
I was real once.
"Why can I see you?"
You see much, but you can see more when you close your eyes.
The woman laughed and disappeared. "Wait! Come back! What does that mean?" I sat up too fast, my wounded leg slipping into the water. "Damn it!" May knocked on the door.
Tessa Marie, are you all right in there?
"Yes, ma'am. I must have fallen asleep. I got my bandages wet." May and Dottie bustled into the bathroom to help me out of the tub. I loved them dearly, even though they had no sense of personal boundaries. In their eyes, I would always be a little girl. I saw the woman again, the one with the long red hair. I pulled a towel around my chest as Dottie bent over my calf with clean bandages.
I figured she'd come to you soon enough. She always comes when you're having troubles.
May glanced at Dottie. I frowned at the silent exchange. "Okay, please tell me what's going on. I can tell you two are hiding something."
"Get dressed and we'll talk," Dottie said.
I limped into the kitchen, and May pulled the good whiskey down. She poured 3 glasses about 3 fingers full and left the bottle in the center of the table. A growing sense of doom filled me as my 86-year-old great-grandmother downed the shot.
"We aren't sure, but Charlie's death may not have been an accident."
May watched Dottie finish her whiskey.
"A healthy heart doesn't just go out like that."
I scratched the side of my head. The logical part of my brain screamed that they called heart disease the silent killer for a reason. Seemingly healthy hearts stopped all the time. Then again, I knew there were things in this world that defied logic. "How does someone cause a heart attack?" I asked.
"A conjurer could do it, with black magic."
May met my eyes.
"Like the fellow you saw in your room with the white cowboy hat."
I downed my whiskey. "Why was he in my room, then?"
"We aren't sure."
May motioned to the necklace.
"That will keep him from hurting you."
The amulet cooled to my touch, maybe because my chest burned from the liquor. Uncle Charlie spoke to me, in the hospital. This news drew both women's attention. Dottie's eyes filled with tears, and I regretted my words. "He told me you two were in danger. Do you have protection necklaces, too?" Dottie shook her head.
"We're safe as long as we're here. The land is sacred and protected."
"The snakes?"
"Yes, along with spells and such."
May refilled her glass. "Then why were the wolves able to get on the property? One almost got into the house last night."
"But he didn't get in. I bet they were trying to draw you out."
I sat back in my chair. None of this made sense. Then again, it didn't not make sense. A wolf turned into a man on the front porch. Anything could happen. "Who is the red-haired woman?" May said,
"I've never seen her, but I believe she's your Uncle Charlie's daughter, Achilla. She died when you were small."
Dottie nodded.
"Her mother was Cherokee."
My curiosity begged me to ask more questions, but my manners held the questions at bay. Did Charlie have a wife before Dottie? Or had he cheated? I'd always believed they'd had an ideal marriage. It was before my time. Dottie squeezed my hand. I poured myself another shot and debated telling them the rest of the conversation with Uncle Charlie. A call to Dr. Marvin Hicks at the University of Florida topped my to-do list. Chapter 9. I limped toward the police station on crutches. My hands hurt and my armpits ached, but I didn't dare get caught without them. May would tan my hide, though the idea of Grandma May with a switch paled in comparison to jail cells. Nervous tension knotted my stomach. I wondered if they'd arrest me on the spot. But detectives said there wouldn't be any charges. Didn't cops lie? They did in the movies. I detoured into a coffee shop to rethink what I'd tell the police. I moved the strap of my laptop case higher on my shoulder and checked the time.
It's always busy this time in the morning,
a male voice said from behind me. I turned and met the most gorgeous set of blue eyes I'd ever seen. Not just blue, but a glassy shade of blue that reminded me of the Caribbean. He wore his dark hair short and tidy. I hadn't given much thought to my wardrobe. The plain gray maxi dress covered my bandages, and the old cardigan added modesty. The flat shoes made it easier to hobble around on crutches. A practical outfit, if not attractive. Everyone's desperate for one cup of good coffee before they have to resort to the office swill. I smiled and turned. Office swill? Who says that? The guy with the eyes laughed. I adjusted my bag again and took a step toward the counter. My back to him. I could feel him watching me. I tried to think of something clever to say. I hadn't gotten a look at his left hand. He looked too good in his worn jeans and gray sports coat. He had to be married. An image flashed through my mind. He sat on a worn brown leather couch, his feet on a coffee table, beer in one hand and remote control in the other. I could smell steak cooking on a grill outside the sliding glass door. A large chocolate lab sprawled out beside him, taking up more couch space than he did. A poster or two on the walls. No feminine touches. I drew a quick breath, unsure of what to make of the vision. I'd invaded his privacy. Ridiculous. My imagination is just playing tricks on me. My mind had wandered where it shouldn't have.
I'm Aaron, by the way.
The sound of his voice made me jump. Huh?
Aaron. My name is Aaron.
Tessa. I shook my head. Sorry, I was in my own bubble there for a second. Nice to meet you, Aaron.
What did you do to your leg?
Oh, it's nothing. A flesh wound. He took it as a joke. I had no desire to tell him a cop had shot me. What kind of person gets shot anyway? We took another step toward the counter. I angled myself so I could watch the line and him at the same time.
What do you do for a living, Tessa?
I liked the sound of my name on his lips. I'm a mental health therapist.
Wow,
he chuckled.
That isn't what I expected.
What did you expect?
I don't know, just not that.
People tended to react in one of two ways when I told them what I did for a living. They either closed up or began spilling their deepest secrets. I bet he would clam up. I took another step toward the counter. An extra large coffee, no cream or sugar. My name is Tessa. The barista behind the counter smirked. Most people ordered the fancy coffees and teas. I already had white hips. No sense in tacking on 500 additional calories in the form of fancy coffee.
Extra large coffee, black. Name's Aaron.
The man said over my head as we moved to the edge of the counter to wait.
How about dinner sometime, Tessa, the mental health therapist?
I waited for the punchline, or for him to change his mind. Had he just asked me out? Our orders came up. I reached for my cup, and his hand brushed mine. He jerked his hand back as if I'd shocked him with static electricity. I caught another flash of his life. This time, he knelt with his arms around two dark-haired children. "Sure, dinner. I'd love to." I couldn't believe it when he scribbled his number on a napkin and stuffed it into my bag.
Great.
He held the door. We walked in the same direction, sipping our coffee. My heart sank when he turned to the entrance of the police station. "Are you a police officer?"
A detective.
"Oh." I waited while he opened the door. My inner voice told me to give his number back. No one sat behind the plexiglass window, but someone had taped a phone list to the window. I couldn't remember the name of the detective who'd come to the hospital. Had he given me a name? I could buzz for Officer Smith, though I doubted the woman would be happy to see me.
Who are you here to see?
Aaron folded his arms across his chest. "Officer Smith?" I smiled and lifted the phone.
All right, well, call me.
He gave me an odd look and disappeared behind another door. I drew a breath and dialed the phone. "Hi, this is Tessa Lamar. You came to talk to me in the hospital?"
I'll be right up.
Officer Smith didn't sound happy. I turned to a bulletin board and studied the faces of wanted criminals and missing children, including the two kids from the news story, Lillian and Jonas Rivera, ages 4 and 18 months. I startled when the door buzzed behind me.
I'm not on your case, but I'll walk you back to Detective Samuels.
Officer Smith led me through rows of cubicles. Did my energy make her nervous? Or was it something else? Something like me facing a murder charge? Aaron leaned against a desk in an office as a small, white-haired woman spoke to another detective. Officer Smith stopped in the open doorway and knocked. My heart fell to my feet. Detective Samuels, who'd I'd met in the hospital, sat behind the desk. To add insult to injury, the old woman turned at the sound of the knock. The witch from the hospital. Dang it! That's her. That's the one I was telling you about. She said she was going to pull the plug, and she did. The wicked witch of the welcome desk pointed. The room temperature spiked and my legs started to throb. I need to sit down. Someone eased me into a chair. The woman spoke with the officers inside the office, but I couldn't make out her words. Not that I needed to hear to know what the old bat was telling them. So much for dinner with Detective Blue Eyes. Chapter 10. The door opened, and Aaron escorted the woman out. When he returned, he avoided my gaze.
Ms. Lamar, will you follow me, please?
I placed a crutch under one shoulder and the laptop case on the other, following him inside the office. I couldn't believe my freaking luck. When did my life turn into such a mess? I decided to ignore Aaron and turned to the other detective. "Good morning, Detective Samuels."
A suspect in 2 murder cases in one day. You've been a busy girl, Miss Lamar.
He studied my face. I didn't kill my uncle.
We will need to touch base with the ICU, but I doubt there's any truth to Mrs. Lipinski's allegations.
He grew more serious.
I'm sorry for your loss. Please forgive my insensitive comment.
I came to look at the pictures again. When you questioned me at the hospital, my aunt and great-grandmother were there. I didn't want to upset them.
Of course.
He opened a file and set a stack of pictures in front of me. I ignored Aaron's presence and studied each picture. I maintained a poker face, determined not to let them see me blanch. Halfway through the stack, I knew I'd seen the would-be intruder before. I saw him at the hospital, getting into an elevator on the 3rd floor, outside of the ICU. Samuels glanced at Aaron, then back to me.
What time was that?
I'm not sure. Maybe 20 minutes before my uncle died? He was with another man, and they seemed angry. I motioned with my hand. Judging from their nonverbal cues, I mean.
Did either of them see you?
No, I don't think so. I went the other way until I heard the elevator door close. If they saw me, it would have been from behind.
What made you turn and go in the other direction?
Aaron crossed his ankles and unfolded his arms. As I said, they seemed angry. They were Native American. At first, I thought it was some of my uncle's tribe coming to visit, only something was off. I don't know why, but I knew I needed to avoid them. I slowed down before I said something stupid. If you check the hospital security cameras, you might be able to get video. Aaron nodded. When you put the photos in front of my aunt and great-grandmother, please use the clean images. One lost a son, the other a husband. They don't need to see these. I sat straighter, emboldened after standing up for my family.
Of course.
Samuels eased back in his chair.
The report said you fired a semi-automatic shotgun through a jalousie window and broke only 2 panes.
No, the guy broke one pane trying to get in. The hole was big enough to shove the barrel through. The second pane broke when I fired. It was a new gun. Smooth. Less kickback.
How many shots did you fire?
1.
Did you reload?
No.
Who taught you to load a ghost round?
Samuel's grin returned. Aaron exhaled a breath between his teeth. My Uncle Charlie. Samuels nodded.
Anything else that might help us solve this case?
Both men perked up a bit when I hesitated, as if sensing I was holding something back. I bent and rubbed my calf above the ring of bandages. Sorry, the gunshot wound is making me wish I'd followed doctor's orders and stayed off it. Tension creased the corners of Samuel's eyes. I can't think of anything else, but I'll let you know if I do. Is that all? Samuels nodded. I stood, making a show of holding on to the back of the chair. Aaron handed me the laptop bag.
Let me walk you out.
Thank you. I wanted to run, or walk very fast, but I'd made such a point of my injury I didn't dare. Aaron turned to me.
Tessa,
Dinner is off? I laughed.
No, not off, just postponed until after the case is over.
He glanced over the cubicles and leaned to whisper,
I'd like to get to know you. Any woman who can look at crime photos without blinking and fire a shotgun, like I said, after the case is solved.
I nodded and hobbled toward the exit. Today sucked, almost as much as yesterday, and I had little hope for improvement. Behind me, Samuel said,
Careful, Burns. You know what they say. Your badge can get you pussy, but the pussy can get your badge.
Yep, being thrown in a jail cell would be a picnic compared to my morning. Chapter 11. My bag bounced against my crutch as I walked into the counseling center. Mr. Owens, my first patient, rose when I entered the building. All eyes turned toward me, and I took a step back. I shouldn't be here, couldn't be here. Lord in heaven, why had I come to work? My boss pushed toward me.
You're over an hour late. Why didn't you call?
I lowered my voice. My phone is dead. Can we speak in private, please? He drew his chin back, flattening his jowls. Did he expect me to discuss my personal issues in front of a lobby full of patients? I limped toward the reception desk in the hopes of gaining a little privacy. I apologized for not calling in. It took me forever to get here with these crutches. My uncle passed away this weekend, and I've been taking care of details.
I see. Well, I suppose that is an acceptable excuse. I won't write you up, but we'll talk more after your session.
The receptionist squirmed, avoiding eye contact with the director. Once he returned to his office, the receptionist sighed. "Are you all right?" "I've been better." I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Mr. Owen stood beside me, fidgeting. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "I'm fine." I motioned toward the chairs. "Mr. Owens, please have a seat in the lobby. I'll be right with you." I turned for the door, but he followed closely behind me, wringing his hands and mumbling. The door between the lobby and the offices remained locked until the receptionist pressed the button. The door buzzed, the lock turned, but I didn't catch it before it locked again. Once again, the receptionist hit the button, and I missed it. "Hey, Mr. Owens, can you get the door?" Once we sat, I decided to begin the session rather than unpack my bag. Mr. Owens's anxiety had spilled over to me. I squared my shoulders and drew a cleansing breath. "I apologize for running late. You seem anxious. Let's get started." I eased back in my chair and waited for him to reply. He looked around the office, ringing and fidgeting. I'd treated him for severe anxiety over the previous year. Of all the patients to keep waiting, he was the worst. "I went to the zoo with my son." Mr. Owens lowered his eyes. "That is an impressive step. How was it for you, taking your son to the zoo?" "We didn't stay. He wanted to look at the snakes." "Mm-hmm. Did you go into the snake exhibit?" He shook his head. "No, I told him I had a headache. We left right after we got inside." "A lot of people don't like snakes. What happened after you left?" Mr. Owen's eyes locked onto my chest. I always dressed modestly for work to avoid potential sexual attraction on the part of my patients. My hand went to the turquoise amulet. "What happened after you left the zoo?" Mr. Owens turned his head, and his eyes went wide. He moved his lips, but could only gasp for air. He clenched his chest as if his heart had ceased to beat. Spittle began to drip down his chin. "Mr. Owens?" I stood, and his panic went from bad to worse. He leaped onto the chair and screamed. No words, just an ear-piercing sound that rivaled an air horn. I lunged for the phone, but he grabbed me before I reached the receiver. I was prepared for him to shove me down, but instead, he pulled me onto the chair by my arms. My calf scraped the edge of the desk, causing pain to burst through my leg. The office door flew open, and 2 male therapists entered the room. Mr. Owen's racket set off emergency protocols. Mr. Owen stopped screaming when the men stormed in. The fit ended, and I started to climb down from the chair. Mr. Owens held me in place and screamed one word that sent the 10 by 10 space into chaos. "Snake!" My patient freaked out, and I held him in an effort to calm him. I knew I didn't have to worry. As much as I disdained the idea of snakes, they wouldn't hurt me. A menacing-looking snake, about 4 feet long, crawled out of my computer bag. It appeared to have diamonds on its back. I didn't hear rattles. Certainly a rattlesnake would rattle. Then again, who could hear the rattling over all the commotion? One of the male therapists backed out of the office. The other froze, crouched, arms wide, prepared to tackle something. Mr. Owens held on to me like a drowning man and once again became the human air horn. People shouted down the hall, "Snake! Rattlesnake! 911! Lockdown!" and various curses. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. We lived in Florida, home of more than 50 species of snakes. However, the fact that the slimy demon had hitched a ride in my bag did give me the willies. It might be my protector, but I'd rather not carry it around. "Mr. Owens, please, I can't breathe. We're safe on the chair." I struggled to get my hand beneath his arm to loosen his grip. I didn't want to have to use self-defense moves while standing on a comfy chair with a potential rattlesnake on the floor. Mr. Owens eased his grip but continued to howl. I managed one deep breath before the entire snake emerged from the laptop bag, and he gripped me even tighter. The other male returned with a push broom in one hand and a fire extinguisher in the other. Did he plan to light the broom on fire and burn the snake? The crouching orderly leaped back and took the broom. He wielded it like a sword, swishing this way and that. "Cut it out! You're only going to make it mad!" I shouted over the screaming patient. How long could a human being continue to scream before his voice gave out? My boss's voice rang out from the hall.
"Close the damned door! The last thing we want is for it to get out!"
One of the men glanced from me to the snake and up the hall. He shrugged and stepped into the hall. Even the croucher began to walk backward toward the door. I, however, couldn't get the hysterical patient to the door without forcing him to step down off the chair. He couldn't hurt himself or me if I forced him to move.
"Tessa, out! Now!"
My boss shouted, red-faced and angry. I shook my head and motioned back toward Mr. Owens, trying to communicate my thoughts without words. It didn't work. My boss slammed the door. I couldn't believe he'd left me alone with a hysterical patient and a potentially poisonous snake. Mr. Owens' screams began to die down, only to return with vigor each time the snake moved. A while later, the door to the office eased open and Mr. Owens launched into a new series of screams. A man wearing hip waders came into the office. Others milled in the hall, but no one else came in. The hip wader guy followed Mr. Owens's wide gaze directly to the coiled snake and pulled out a long metal stick with a hook. As if the snake sensed a worthy adversary, its telltale rattle filled the office. Mr. Owens' nails dug into my arm, clawing me like a feral cat. The more the wrangler poked the snake, the more Mr. Owens clawed. "Stop it!" I shouted. To my amazement, Mr. Owens stilled and quieted behind me. The wrangler looked as if I'd sprouted a second head, and even the snake stopped rattling.
"What the hell?"
I have no idea. I needed to get down from the chair. My head throbbed. The wrangler hooked the snake and pulled the loop closed. The snake wiggled as he dropped it into a heavy sack inside a 5-gallon bucket. Mr. Owens fainted. I tried to catch him before he hit the ground, and missed. "Could you check my bag for more hitchhikers?" The wrangler poked the bag a couple of times and looked inside.
"All clear."
"Thanks." I collapsed into the chair. Chapter 12. 2 paramedics came into the room. One tended to Mr. Owens, the other placed his hand on my shoulder.
"Miss, are you injured?"
I wanted to yell, but the paramedic didn't deserve my anger. "My arm." Aaron and Detective Samuels crowded into my office. I frowned and turned my attention to the stinging in my arm. The paramedic swabbed the betadine over the scratches.
These are superficial. I'll clean and bandage them. You should follow up with your primary physician.
The paramedic motioned to the blood on my foot.
Is your leg injured?
I must have gone numb at some point because I'd forgotten about my leg. I have a superficial gunshot wound. I hit it against the desk pretty hard.
Miss Lamar, are you up to giving us a statement?
Detective Samuels asked, a hint of humor in his voice. Why? Unless you're going to charge the snake with something, no crimes were committed here.
Since there were snakes involved in the attempted break-in, there may be a connection. We aren't ruling anything out.
Aaron sounded almost apologetic. Sure, why not? Samuel shut the door.
Who has access to this office?
The clinical staff and the director. My door was unlocked this morning when I came in. I lock it at night when I leave. But I think the snake was already in my bag when I came in.
What? The bag you were carrying around in the station?
Samuels paled. You know, we treat phobias here if you're afraid of snakes. Samuels cleared his throat, and Aaron raised his hand to cover his smile.
Mind if I take a look?
Aaron motioned to the bag. Help yourself. The Wrangler already looked. Samuels took a step back as Aaron set my bag on the desk and removed Uncle Charlie's cedar box. No! I shouted before I could stop myself. I mean, that's personal. It belonged to my uncle. My reaction drew out the cop in Samuels. He stepped closer to the desk to get a look. Great. Now they think I have something to hide. I motioned to the bag. Sorry. Go ahead and look inside. I turned my head and wished my office had a window. Instead, I studied the pale green wall while the detectives rummaged through my uncle's personal items. It didn't take that long to check for snakes. Aaron had turned his back as Samuel studied the picture of Charlie and me. Samuel set it inside the box and closed the lid. Satisfied, detectives? My voice cracked. Aaron asked,
Do you have security cameras in the building?
You will need to speak with the director. I stood as soon as the paramedic finished bandaging my leg. I slid my computer and the box back into my bag and slung it over my shoulder. Any more questions?
No.
Aaron lowered his eyes. I did my best to storm out, but with the heavy bag, a crutch, and fresh wounds, storming turned into skulking. Neither detective spoke as I moved past them. My boss stood in the hall with his arms folded across his chest.
Where are you going?
I'm going home. I'll be out for a few days on bereavement leave.
Policy states bereavement leave can only be used in the event of the death of immediate family members.
He puffed his chest out like a rooster, a big, cheaply dressed, balding rooster. Fine. Then use a few days of the 7.5 weeks of unused vacation time as bereavement, or my 2 weeks' notice. Your choice. I needed to get out of the building before I imploded.
Policy doesn't allow vacation time to be used in lieu of 2 weeks' notice,
he snorted. I'm in no state to be seeing patients. I tried one last attempt at reason.
If you quit without notice, you can be reported for patient abandonment.
I dropped the computer bag and the crutch, ignoring the other people in the hall. Refer my patients to Jenkins and Associates. I'll be starting there as soon as I can bury my uncle. In my mind, that should have been enough. At least he couldn't accuse me of abandoning my patients. He behaved like a schoolyard bully, unhappy to lose his favorite target.
Policy states that the therapist must notify.
Something inside me snapped, causing me to suffer from stress-induced insanity. This man had crossed the line between friendly boss and sexual harasser more than once. Words bubbled up from my belly. I growled to keep them inside, to not give him the satisfaction of seeing me completely lose it. I failed. "You heartless son of a bitch! Keep it up, and I'll file a report with the board for sexual harassment. It's not only against policy, it's illegal to grope your staff, or did they not teach you that in—" A hand rested on the small of my back, and Aaron stepped between us.
Miss Lamar, I would be happy to take your statement regarding sexual harassment.
"Not today. I'll contact you when I'm ready." I took a few steps forward, and they allowed me to pass. Chapter 13. I sat in the cafe with Haley in the midst of a full-blown pity party, barely holding back tears. If I cried, I'd never stop. I fought my more basic instincts to drink myself stupid or to call Ian for a post-breakup booty call. I didn't want to explain the events of the morning to Dottie and May. I needed a few minutes to pull myself together. I needed lunch with my best friend. "Haley, how is this my life?" I pushed my salad around on my plate. "It will get better. Look at this like cleaning house. You hated that job. You needed to dump Ian. Heck, you needed to clean your apartment. Maybe things aren't as bleak as you think." Haley's advice should have helped, only I didn't want logic. I needed to wallow for a while before moving on. I told her, "I know you're right, but it sucks all the same." I picked at the bandage on my arm. "Your dad is okay with me coming to work for him? My current patients aren't exactly the paying type." "He's thrilled. As soon as you're up for it, he wants you to carry half of my caseload. Scott wants me to cut my hours soon. I have months before the baby is born, but he worries." Haley stuffed French fries into her mouth. I hated dumping my crap on her. "The adult half of your caseload?" I feared Haley would attempt to bring out my maternal instincts by loading my caseload with kids. "Yep, all adults. I can't have you scaring the kiddos with bags of snakes." Haley laughed. "Tell me again about the hot detective." "I don't know what else there is to tell. He's too hot to be a cop. We can't do dinner or anything until they close the case on the attempted break-in. I get the feeling there's something else going on. I mean, what if they change their minds and charge me with killing that guy?" The waiter overheard the wrong part of our conversation and sidestepped the table. Haley finished the last of her fries. "Stop borrowing trouble. You have enough on your plate right now without looking for more." "You're right." I tossed my napkin on the table. "I should get going." "Yeah, me too. My boss is a jerk." "Your dad is a saint." "I know. Let's check out that junk shop down the block. They have some vintage Winnie the Pooh stuff in the window." Haley's face brightened. We walked into the dusty shop. Haley rummaged through the vintage Pooh for her nursery, while I perused a shelf of antique bottles. I pulled a bottle down, turning it over to check the price.
"That one is $75.
The voice behind me caught me off guard. I almost dropped the bottle as I turned toward an elderly gentleman.
"It's an old decanter from the late 1800s.
I smiled and returned the decanter to the shelf. "I'm looking for bottles from my great-grandmother's bottle tree."
"Bottle tree?"
"She hangs them from an old oak on metal clothes hangers and twine. The clear ones are for wishes, and the colored ones trap evil spirits." I chuckled. It's pretty, even if you don't believe in wishes or evil spirits. The old man tilted his head.
I believe in both, and I think you do, too.
His eyes fell to the amulet.
I have just the thing.
I followed him to the back of the store. Something about him set me at ease. He lifted a box, filled to the brim with bottles, and set it on the counter. I inspected one of the bottles. These are perfect. How much?
Oh, I don't know.
He looked over the box, and I prepared myself for a hefty price tag.
10 for the box. When I picked them up, I thought they might be antiques. They aren't anything special.
Deal. I pulled out my wallet and handed him a $10 bill. Haley carried a bag of Winnie the Pooh antiques. I followed behind, directing the shopkeeper to my car. May would love the bottles. See you next week. I'll drop off the case files when I visit Dottie. It's going to be like old times working together. Haley laughed as she embraced me. I can't wait. My eyes grew misty. The entire world hadn't gone to hell in a handbasket. Just my world.